I've been slinging drinks at the Last Stop bar and grill just off Highway 30 for the better part of 20 years. Rural Wyoming isn't exactly bustling with traffic, but we get a curious mix through these doors. Truckers trying to beat their sleep, tourists lost on their way to Yellowstone, and of course, the locals, an odd assortment of ranchers and loners, the sort you suspect might be running from something or maybe hiding it. It's a life, and it keeps me fed. Things get strange out here, especially come winter. The wind has a way of whistling through the gaps in the siding like it's trying to whisper something sinister. It's not the kind of job where you punch out and forget about it till tomorrow. Over the years, I've developed my own set of rules to stay sane and safe out here. I don't talk about them much. Folks might start wondering if I'm the oddball. My first rule: never let the jukebox play past midnight. Sounds simple, right? There's just something unsettling about the way old tunes echo in empty spaces. The Last Stop closes at 2, but if that machine keeps playing when the room's near empty, the songs don't sound quite right. Like they're playing just a hair too slow, warping the voices. The night that set off a chain of lengthy unease was a bitter cold Tuesday, one of those nights where your breath hangs in front of you like a cloud of smoke even indoors. Stan, one of our regulars, had nestled into his usual corner booth, nursing a warm beer to its last drops. The clock had just nudged past midnight. I was reaching to turn off the jukebox, following my own rule, when the door slammed open. At this hour, any new face is odd, but this guy was odder still. Dressed in a pristine black coat that didn't fit the season's wear and tear, he carried an aroma that was out of place, like freshly turned earth and old books. Old memories maybe, but sharper. He slid into a bar stool, eyes hidden beneath a wide-brimmed hat. "Just coffee black," he said. His voice was calm, almost too smooth, like he rehearsed it. "Kitchen's closed," I replied, keeping one hand on the jukebox switch. "I can do instant." "That'll do," he nodded, never looking up. While the coffee gurgled into the pot, I kept an eye on him through the mirror behind the bar. He hadn't moved, not even a twitch. It wasn't until I set the steaming cup in front of him that I saw his hands, long fingers, exceptionally pale and strangely clean. Most hands out here bear deep-set grime or scars from labor or the cold. Not him. Breaking the silence once more, he asked, "You get many travelers this time of year?" "Some," I began cautiously, sensing a prickle of sweat despite the cold. "Mostly lost ones." He chuckled, a sound that seemed to crawl up from somewhere deep and unwelcome. "Aren't we all?" And with that, he turned his attention to the window, staring into the black, snowy nothingness like he expected something to come out of it. Unease settled thickly between us. That's when I noticed the scent again, stronger now, like rain about to fall, though the sky had been dry for weeks. I chalked it up to the weirdness of the night, trying to ignore the creeping dread that lodged itself deep in my gut. As I started wiping down glasses, trying to ignore him, the clock ticked tediously towards closing time. The silence was unbearable. I'd glance over occasionally, always catching him staring intently out the window. Finally, he stood, dropping a crisp, unusually blue $100 bill on the counter. "For the coffee and your troubles," he said without another word, then walked out into the cold night, never looking back. I went to the door, locking it behind him, and peered out into the darkness. Nothing moved. For a moment, I thought I saw a figure in the distance, just within the reach of the bar's exterior lights, but it must have been my nerves playing tricks. Back behind the bar, I picked up the $100 bill. It was then I realized it was too light, too crisp, and had no president's face printed on it, just an intricate pattern of vines and unfamiliar symbols. The wrongness of it sent a shiver down my spine. Maybe should have offered him something stronger than coffee, I thought, tucking the strange bill away. Whatever game was being played here, I didn't want any part of it. But as the wind started up again outside, howling its ancient, lonesome sound, I knew deep in my bones he'd be back. And I needed to be ready. The wooden floorboards creaked beneath my feet as I paced the length of the living room, each step echoing in the hollow silence that enveloped the cottage. My fingers fluttered to the thin curtains, peering out into the churning darkness. Nothing, just the skeletal branches thrashing under the weight of the howling wind, their shadows like fingers scratching at the windows. Closing the curtains, I turned to the mantel where the pale glow of the fireplace cast eerie shadows on the walls. The flames flickered, as if struggling to maintain their existence against the cold seeping in from the outside. The old shotgun still lay there, just where I had left it after last time. As my hand closed around the wooden stock, a creeping realization surfaced. The last remnants of buckshot were now chambered, a futile hope against an enigmatic and seemingly unearthly adversary. A faint scratching started up above, probably just a branch against the roof, or so I tried to convince myself. But the sound grew more urgent, more deliberate, as though something were etching symbols into the wood. I pressed my ear against the cold wall, holding my breath, straining to listen over the pounding of my own heart. The scratching stopped. Silence. Then, a thud upstairs, heavy and final. My pulse quickened, and I bolted up the narrow staircase. The hallway was pitch black, the only light spilled from the tiny flashlight I had grabbed from the drawer. It cast grotesque shapes onto the floral wallpaper as the beam trembled in my unsteady hand. Another thud, this time, from the end of the hall. The guest room. As I neared the door, it creaked ominously open on its own, as though inviting me into its secrets. Inside, I shone the light around, the bed unmade, the window shut tight, but the wardrobe, slightly ajar. I nudged it with the barrel of the gun. The door swung open, revealing nothing but old coats and a stale smell of mothballs. Relieved yet tense, I sighed, turning to leave when the window rattled violently like something desperate to get in or out. The suddenness made me stumble backward, crashing into the wardrobe. As I steadied myself, the room chilled perceptibly, breath visible in the air, and I heard it, a soft, low moan that seemed to come from right beside me, near the floor. Crouching down, flashlight quivering, the beam fell upon a small, old doll with one eye missing, lying forgotten in the corner. Its other eye seemed to flicker with a sinister semblance of life under the dim light. The moan had turned into a whisper just as the temperature dropped further, a whisper that promised, "You will never be alone again." Pushing myself up, I fled from the room, slamming the door behind me, the sound echoing mockingly down the dark hallway. With every step, the cottage seemed to close in around me, the walls whispering secrets in a language not meant for the living. Back downstairs, I slumped against the door, the floorboards chilled against my back. That's when the photographs on the walls started to sway slightly, as if in a breeze that shouldn't exist indoors. My eyes scanned the images, generations of families who'd lived here, their expressions shifting subtly, unnervingly, too alive. In their eyes, a glimmer of something akin to pity, or perhaps anticipation. That's when the real wind began, a sound from the chimney, different from the howl outside. A choking, gasping, baleful wail that seemed to come from deep within the earth. As I stood, frozen, the fire sputtered and died, smothered by an unseen force. The cold was now a living thing, an entity that had found its way inside, seeping into the very bones of the house and my flesh. As I gripped the gun tighter, knowing its uselessness, the wind carried one final whisper through the flue, a sorrowful yet mocking imitation of my own voice. Ready or not, here I come. The last ember in the hearth winked out, plunging me into unfathomable darkness, and somewhere in the house, the sound of a single, slow, deliberate step on the staircase, and then another. My breath hitched, every instinct screaming to flee, yet my limbs turned treacherous, binding me to the spot beside the cold, dead fireplace. Each step reverberated through the empty house, measured and heavy, a drum roll to my pounding heart. I tried convincing myself it was just the house settling, old bones creaking in the dead of night. But houses don't wear heavy, dragging boots. The darkness seemed alive, thick and pulsing, as if swallowing the little air left in the room. I fumbled along the wall, my fingertips skimming over the cold wallpaper, seeking the light switch despite knowing the futility. The power had gone out hours ago with the first roll of the storm that still thrashed outside. Thunder rumbled, a distant companion to the nearer dread. Step by step, they ascended, relentless. I could almost count the heartbeats between each one. Was it getting faster? Or was it my mind racing ahead to every horrific possibility? As if in response, a faint glow began to seep under the door of the parlor across the hall where the staircase landed. It wasn't the warm gold of candlelight, but a sickly, pale blue, like phosphorescence glimpsed in the deepest ocean on television documentaries. The sort of light that has no earthly business in a Victorian drawing room. I squinted against the dimness, trying to outline the shapes forming on the other side of the glass. The door, a solid old thing of stained oak, rattled subtly in its frame. A shard of something colder than the night air pricked at my skin. "Who's there?" My voice emerged as a croak, far less commanding than I intended. The steps halted. Silence swallowed my words, and for a heartbeat, everything paused, the storm outside, the wind against the house, my very breath. Then a dragging sound, like heavy cloth or chains across the floorboards, moving from the staircase towards the parlor door. The doorknob twitched, a slow, deliberate motion ghosting under the eerie light. I stepped back, my heel catching on the edge of the rug, sending a sharp stab of panic up my leg. My back pressed against the cold wall, nowhere else to go. The door creaked open. From the sliver of ungodly light, a shadow stretched onto the wooden floor of the hallway, elongating like a tendril. I couldn't make out the form it belonged to, just the looming, increasing wrongness of its shape. Something in my mind screamed to look away, but terror rooted my gaze to that spot. The light flickered, and with each pulse, the shadow grew taller, closer. I blinked, the fear-stung tears from my eyes, each brief closure an agony of darkness. When my vision cleared, the shadow had reached midway across the hall, almost to my feet. A wind that should not exist indoors brushed past me, carrying whispers. Words escaped understanding, yet they chilled deeper than the drafts from any gale outside. It felt as if the house itself was breathing, exhaling stories left untold, secrets meant to stay buried in the groan of wood and the shift of shadows. A memory flickered, unbidden, more terrifying in its normalcy. The way my sister, Sarah, used to stand at the top of these stairs, calling down to me. The way her voice would echo in just such a disconcerting manner. But Sarah was gone, lost to us one winter's night much like this, spirited away by shadows not unlike these. Or so my childhood fears had painted those grief-stricken days. Another step from the unseen horror. Closer still. The blue light now drowned the hall in its otherworldly sheen, the shadow almost at my trembling toes. My thoughts scrambled. All reason succumbed to the primal, urgent need to not let those shadows touch me. With a ragged breath that took all my will, I sidestepped, my shoulder scraping the wall, and I forced a clumsy, blind dash toward the back of the house, away from the staircase, away from the creeping light and its infernal bearer. Every step heavier than the last, as if gravity conspired to claim me, keep me grounded in this nightmare. The echoes of my own flight were now all I could hear over the hammering of my heart, every thud a confirmation that I was still alive, still able to escape, even as the house seemed to close in around me, the storm outside mirroring my inner turmoil, leaving me to wonder, could I really escape what was already inside? The air grew colder with each step, my shivering frame betraying my attempts to steel myself against the creeping dread. The wood beneath my feet moaned with age. The walls themselves seemed to pulse with a silent, rhythmic malevolence. The dim light from my trembling flashlight danced shadows across the peeling wallpaper, grotesque shapes that twisted my stomach with fear. I should have left. I should never have come to this place. But the nagging curiosity that led me to the doorstep of this cursed house now pushed me further into its decaying heart. My breath hitched as I reached the bottom of the stairs, standing now in the black maw of the hallway. Each room beckoned like an open jaw, daring me to step inside. Compelled by a morbid fascination, I edged towards the nearest doorway, the beam of my flashlight cutting a weak swath of light into the engulfing dark. As I crossed the threshold, the faint, unmistakable scent of old perfume prickled my nostrils. It was floral, heavy, a scent that should have dissipated decades ago, yet here it lingered as if worn by invisible shoulders. The room was in disarray, furniture draped with white sheets that looked almost spectral in the dim, flickering light. I approached a dresser, the mirror above it smeared with grime. Heart pounding, I reached out a shaking hand to wipe it clean. My fingers brushed the surface, and I staggered back, a gasp escaping my lips. Behind my reflection, blurred by dirt and age, was the faint outline of someone else. A woman, her expression twisted in sorrow or pain. It was impossible to tell. My mind screamed to flee, but my feet betrayed me, rooted to the rotting carpet as if grown into the very fibers. That's when the whispers started, soft, insidious, weaving through the cracks in the house like smoke. They called my name, voices so sweet and sorrowful that a part of me wanted to answer, to yield to their mournful song. It was madness to listen, to even consider they were anything but figments of my fear-addled mind. But they knew my name. How could they know my name? I turned the flashlight, beams slicing through the darkness towards the sound. Nothing. Only the dense, oppressive silence of the rest of the house answered back. My heart raced, each beat a drum sounding my retreat, yet still I delved deeper. The next room awaited, its door ajar, whispering secrets. As I moved, the house seemed to breathe with me, walls subtly flexing, floors creaking in sympathy. Or were they trying to speak, warning me, perhaps pleading? The air grew stifling, thick with dust and decay. My flashlight flickered as if struggling against the darkness that sought to choke its light. I tapped it, fear squeezing my chest as the light stabilized, a thin, precarious lifeline in the engulfing dark. I pushed into what looked to be an old library. Books lined the walls, their spines gnarled and deformed by time. The musty smell of paper and mold assaulted my senses, my eyes watering as I scanned the room. That's when I saw it, a book lying apart from the others, as if waiting for me. Its cover was leather, worn and cracked, the title long faded. Drawn by a force I couldn't understand, I reached for it, the whispering growing louder, more insistent. They swirled around me, words unintelligible yet full of emotion, pleading, threatening. My fingers brushed the cover, the leather cold and somehow repulsive under my touch. I opened it. The pages were blank, or so they seemed at first. But as I stared, words began to bleed onto the page, dark ink blossoming like blood in water. My name appeared over and over, a chant, a mantra, or a curse. I dropped the book, backing away as the whispers crescendoed into an almost physical presence, crowding against me, oppressive and overwhelming. The light from the flashlight dimmed to a mere heartbeat, pulsing weakly against the shadows that now seemed to reach for me with tangible hunger. My mind reeled, the room spun, and that persistent voice inside screamed for me to run, to escape the madness that clung to the very walls of this damned house. As I turned to flee, my foot caught on a loose floorboard. I stumbled, the ground rushing up to meet me. And the last thing I saw before the blackness claimed me was the ceiling above. The plaster cracked in the semblance of a grinning face.